The mule was dying beneath her. Every bone in its ragged frame jolted with each step, and the woman on its back clung to the saddle horn with what strength she had left. Dust stuck to her lashes, blurring the outline of the town ahead. Her dress, once a faded yellow cotton thing, was now torn and dark with sweat, clinging to the swell of her belly. Each breath scraped against her ribs like dry wind against pine bark. She didn't cry. She'd done all the crying back in the canyon when the last coin ran out and the man with whiskey breath promised he'd only be gone for a day. Now she just needed to make it to town. The mule stumbled, her weight shifted, and the sharp pain in her back caught her breath in a gasp. She slid sideways off the saddle and hit the dirt hard. The world swam for a moment. Then she heard laughter, small, startled, high-pitched. A group of children had gathered near the edge of the town's main street, holding hoops and sticks and a worn leather ball. They stared at the heap she'd become in the dust, wide-eyed. One of them, a girl with freckles and a red ribbon tied around her wrist, pointed and cried, "Mama can't stand, sir, she's pregnant." From the shaded porch of the marshal's office, boots tapped wood. A chair scraped. Marshal Boaz Langley stood slowly, brushing crumbs from his lap. He stepped out into the sunlight, squinting toward the commotion. His face, carved by wind and worry, stayed unreadable until the woman lifted her head. Then the air changed. He froze. One hand went to the brim of his hat as if to tip it, but his fingers failed him. The hat slipped from his grip and landed softly in the dust. The woman looked up, face shadowed by the angle of the sun, but he knew, even after all those years, the tilt of her jaw, the scar faintly traced down her left cheek like a whisper of something once cruel. He'd never forgotten. Her lips parted, dry and cracked. She didn't say his name. Didn't need to. He stepped off the porch and crossed the road, boots leaving firm impressions in the red dirt. The children parted, silent now, watching with eyes too young to understand what passed between the two grown-ups. He knelt beside her. She tried to rise. He stopped her with a firm hand. "I can walk," she rasped. "I don't doubt it," he said. Then he gathered her in his arms, careful as a man lifting a wounded bird. The townsfolk began to gather in doorways and windows. Curtains twitched, lips moved without sound. Whispers, heavy with assumption, filled the air like locusts before rain. Boaz carried her up the hill past the livery, past the church, past the sheriff's office where a broad-shouldered figure stepped out and narrowed his eyes. But the marshal didn't stop. He brought her to his own cabin, a place plain and clean, the porch swept that morning, the door freshly oiled. He nudged it open with his foot and stepped inside. The cabin swallowed the town behind them. He laid her on the bed. The woman flinched against the softness. "You hungry?" he asked. She turned her head to the side, eyes closed. Her lips trembled, but she said nothing. He lit the stove, moved like a man who'd lived too many years alone. The kettle hissed. He poured her a tin cup of water and set it beside the bed. She didn't reach for it. Outside, the wind began to rise. A shutter creaked. He sat across the room, facing her. "How long since you ate?" She opened her eyes slowly, as if pulling herself from another place. "Yesterday morning," she said. "Maybe." He stood and pulled down a tin of beans, cracked it open, and set it over the fire. As it warmed, he glanced over at her. Her hands clutched the blanket, white-knuckled. "Name's still Langley," he said. "I figured," she said quietly. He stirred the beans. Tea. His scent filled the cabin, warm and earthy. "Been gone, what, 7 years?" he said, not looking at her. 6 and some, she replied. "Where'd you go?" She exhaled through her nose. "Where I thought was safe." He brought the pan over and offered her a spoonful. She ate slowly, as if every bite cost her something. He waited. Then, "Whose is it?" Her eyes snapped to his. "Not yours, if that's what you're asking." "I didn't ask," he said. He looked down. "Just trying to understand." She chewed another bite, swallowed. "A man I trusted, he's gone." Gone like walked away? Gone like buried outside Tallow Ridge? He didn't speak after that. The storm rolled closer. Thunder mumbled against the foothills. A breeze pushed through the open window and lifted the curtain like a breath. She looked toward it, then winced and shifted on the bed. He noticed. "You need a doctor?" he asked. She shook her head. "Just rest. If I can keep still, the pains stay quiet. Town doctor's a drunk, wouldn't trust him with a hangnail, let alone a baby." "I'm not due yet," she murmured. "A couple weeks, maybe." You sure? No. He stood and lit the lantern. The light flickered over her face, illuminating shadows beneath her eyes and the lines time had carved in her. He looked at her for a long moment, then said, "Why'd you come back?" She didn't answer right away. The beans sat cooling on the pan beside her untouched. "I was tired of running," she said. "And you were the last person I remembered not wanting anything from me." The kettle screamed softly. He removed it, poured 2 cups, set one by her hand, kept the other for himself. Outside, the wind picked up. Dust scuttled across the porch like dry leaves. The first drops of rain ticked the roof. She took a sip, then cradled the cup with both hands. "I dreamed of this cabin once," she said, eyes half closed. "But I was never brave enough to walk to it." He sat back down in the rocker across from her. "Bravery's overrated," he said. "Most brave men end up dead or full of holes. You just need to be stubborn." She gave a breathy laugh that turned into a cough. He reached for the water and handed it to her. "I'm sorry," she said after a long silence. "For what?" "For disappearing. For not saying goodbye. For not writing." "You left a note," he said. "That was something." "I thought I was doing the right thing," she whispered. "But I was wrong." He nodded slowly, staring at the flames. "The right thing don't always look right till years later," he said. Outside, a knock hit the door. Sharp, firm. Boaz stood and opened it. Sheriff Hatch loomed on the porch, tall and confident, his badge catching the lantern light. "Evenin', Marshal," Hatch said, eyes darting past him into the cabin. "Heard you had company." Boaz didn't step aside. "She's sick, needs rest." "She also carries questions with that belly," Hatch said, tilting his head. "Folks are whisperin', think we got a right to know who she is and why she's here." Boaz didn't flinch. "She's here because she needed shelter." "Is she yours?" "No." "Then why?" "Because I said so." Behind him, she coughed again. Hatch narrowed his eyes. "You forget who's sheriff now?" Boaz's jaw tensed. "No, I remember." Hatch chewed on that, lips tightening. "Town won't like it." Boaz didn't blink. "They don't have to." Rain hit harder now, a curtain of it. Thunder boomed behind the hills like distant cannon fire. Hatch stepped back. "Just don't bring trouble to my door, Marshal." Then he disappeared into the storm. Boaz shut the door and bolted it. She watched him. "You always were good at making enemies." He gave her a tired half-smile. "They just like to make themselves." She closed her eyes again. "I shouldn't have come." He shook his head. "You came. That's what matters." The fire crackled. Wind howled. He sat near the door, rifle laid across his lap, as the storm wrapped around the cabin like a warning. Inside, in the dim flicker of oil light, the woman breathed, uneven and slow. She drifted between sleep and pain, her hand resting protectively over the curve of her belly. Boaz didn't sleep. He watched the door, listened for more than thunder. The past, he knew, didn't come knocking, it just let itself in, and this time it had come home in the rain. By nightfall, the storm had settled over the town like a war drum, low, constant, and building. Rain came sideways against the windows, pushing dust through the cracks, and thunder rolled across the sky in slow intervals like boots echoing down a church aisle. The woman stirred beneath the quilt, clutching her belly tighter with each passing gust. Her skin shone pale against the firelight, and her breaths came shorter now. Boaz watched her from the chair beside the hearth, his elbows on his knees, eyes never straying far from her face. He saw what was coming, but kept quiet. He'd known storms like this before, both kinds. The ones that stripped shingles and split trees, and the ones that broke a man's peace just when he thought it might hold. He felt both now. A faint knock tapped against the cabin's side wall, not the door, but wood near the barn. Boaz stood quickly, rifle in hand, and opened the back door to a shadow standing just beyond the overhang. Tama stepped into the light. Rain slid off the thick animal hide coat draped over his shoulders. His eyes, always narrow and unreadable, glanced once toward the cabin's interior. Boaz gave a single nod, stepping aside without words. Tama entered silently, his presence unannounced but never unexpected. He left a trail of wet behind him, leaned his bow against the doorframe, and set a small pouch of herbs on the table. "She's early," Tama said quietly, his voice like wind dragging over stone. Boaz looked back at the bed. "Too early." "She strong?" "She was." Tama moved toward the fire, holding his hands over it. "Storm'll worsen before it breaks." Boaz looked out the window. Town's restless. Sheriff already came. Tama didn't look surprised. They fear what they don't understand. She's not a threat. No, Tama said, eyes on the flames. But the baby might be. From the bed she moaned softly and shed. It again, the pain crawling up her spine. Tama took a sprig of dried leaves from his pouch and began to crush it into a basin. Boaz watched. She won't take anything she doesn't know. She doesn't have to, Tama replied. Steam will do. Boaz turned toward the door as another knock, this time at the front, broke through the tension. It was sharper, less patient. Boaz opened it slowly. Sheriff Hatch stood on the porch again, this time with two men behind him, Deputy Lake and Old Harlan, the tanner with a thirst for gossip. Hatch's coat was soaked through, but his pride was bone dry. "We ain't done," he said, stepping forward. Boaz blocked the entrance. "You made yourself clear earlier." "Town's worried," Hatch continued. "We got a stranger holed up carrying who knows what, protected by a lawman who's forgotten where the line is." Boaz didn't move. "That your official concern?" "It's the town's. She's in labor." "Then it's the perfect time to find out the father," Hatch said, his voice rising. "Because I got folks saying she's run with outlaws. She might have brought heat down on us all." Boaz's voice stayed low, like the barrel of a gun that hadn't fired yet. "She hasn't brought anything but herself, and I'll answer for her." Hatch laughed once, no humor in it. "You don't speak for the whole town." Boaz leaned forward. "Maybe not. But tonight, this cabin's mine. That child's about to be born, and you're standing between a woman and the only bit of peace she's known in years. So unless you got a warrant, turn around." A long pause. Rain beat the porch roof like drums in judgment. Then Hatch stepped back. "You're digging a hole, Langley. You just don't know how deep yet." Boaz closed the door without a word. He turned back and found her sitting up, breath short, face pale. "They're not wrong," she said hoarsely. "I did ride with men. They weren't all good. You already said you were alone now." "I am." "That's enough." She lowered her eyes. "You're going to lose everything protecting me." Boaz crossed to her side. "I lost everything a long time ago. You being here is the first thing that's made sense since." She turned her face to the wall, pressing her hand to her belly as another contraction hit. The pain clawed across her ribs and down her spine. She cried out this time, the sound raw and loud in the small cabin. Tama moved quietly to her side, placing the bowl of steaming herbs beneath the bed and adjusting the cloth near her head. Boaz asked, "You ever delivered one?" Tama shook his head. "But I've seen wild things born in worse places." Another contraction surged. She bit down on the blanket to muffle the scream. Boaz knelt beside her, took her hand. It was trembling. "I'm not ready," she whispered. "None of us are," he said, "but you're not alone." The hours passed slowly, broken only by thunder and her cries. Rain leaked through the chinks in the roof and ran in dark lines along the walls. Tama tended the fire, boiled cloth, said nothing. Boaz never left her side. Sometime near midnight, a silence fell, unnatural and complete. The storm paused as if holding its breath. She stared up at the ceiling, soaked in sweat, face ghostly in the lantern light. "I'm scared," she said. Boaz touched her face gently. "So am I." She tried to smile. It broke midway, collapsed into sobbing. "What if I can't do it?" "You can. What if I do and it dies?" "Then we'll bury it together, but not before we fight for it." Lightning flashed again. The baby was coming. Tama moved to her other side, held her shoulder as the contractions rippled through her body. She screamed, and the sound cut through the walls, reached the ears of those still awake in town. Down in the church parsonage, the preacher's wife sat straight up in bed. In the boarding house, someone crossed themselves. In the saloon, cards stopped mid-hand. Inside the cabin, the only sound was her voice, desperate, ragged. Then suddenly, silence again. No cry. Boaz froze. The woman's body went limp, her eyes fluttered. Tama leaned forward, brow furrowed. Then, finally, a wail, thin, sharp, defiant. She burst into tears, covering her face with shaking hands. Boaz lifted the newborn gently in a towel. It squirmed, pink and alive. A boy. He looked down at the child and his voice cracked. "You did it." She nodded, still sobbing. Is he okay? Boaz placed the baby in her arms. He's perfect. Tama stepped back into the shadows, leaving them alone in the golden lantern glow. She looked at the child as if seeing light for the first time. Her lips moved, forming silent words before she spoke aloud. I thought about names, she said softly. Not before, but just now. When I thought I'd die. Boaz sat beside her, watching the boy's small hands curl in reflex. What came to you? She brushed her fingers across the child's head, as if making a vow. Chance. Boaz looked at her, then back at the baby. He nodded once. That's what he is, she whispered. Not a second one, just the only one that matters now. Thunder rolled again, but softer this time, distant. Boaz stood and walked to the window. The clouds were thinning, the wind was letting go. Rain still fell, but gently now, like ash from a dying fire. The town beyond slept uneasily. Inside their homes, they stirred, they wondered, but none dared to climb the hill again that night. Boaz turned back and saw her lying with Chance resting on her chest, both breathing in tandem. Tama, leaning against the wall, finally spoke. He'll have your eyes. She looked over. That a good thing? He nodded. Eyes that see pain and still look forward. Boaz moved to the hearth, added one last log to the fire. He'll be judged, she said, her voice thin, for where he came from, who raised him. Boaz answered slowly. Then we teach him to stand taller than judgment. She nodded, but fear lingered in her gaze. Boaz crossed to the table and pulled a clean piece of cloth from a drawer. It was soft and worn, a corner of an old shirt that used to belong to his brother. He folded it into a square and laid it gently on the boy's chest. Tama picked up his bow and slung it over his shoulder. I'll leave you to the quiet, he said. Boaz stopped him. You helped. Tama tilted his head. No, I witnessed. And then he was gone, into the wet silence of the fading storm. Boaz sat down again beside her, close enough to feel the warmth of her body. She closed her eyes, drifting. When her voice came again, it was barely a whisper. Why are you doing this, Boaz? He thought for a long time. I don't know. Maybe because I needed saving too. She said nothing more. He watched over her and the child until the fire burned low. His hand rested on the edge of the bed, close enough to hers but not touching. The storm was over, but the questions remained, and with morning would come more knocks, more judgment, more reckonings. But for now, the cabin held peace, and in that fragile peace, something new had begun. Sunlight broke over the hills with a quiet kind of triumph, diffused and golden, like something earned after a long trial. The storm had passed, but left its signature everywhere. Mud streaked across the town's dirt road, branches scattered like forgotten thoughts, and a wet hush over everything, as though the earth itself was still catching its breath. Inside the marshal's cabin, the fire had gone to embers. The child lay sleeping against his mother's chest, swaddled in warmth and worn cloth, while Boaz sat nearby, eyes red from lack of sleep but calm, still as stone. He'd barely moved through the night except to stoke the fire or adjust the blanket around them both. She stirred beneath the quilt, slow and deliberate. A hand moved instinctively to the baby, as if to make sure he was still real. Her eyes opened. They met Boaz's, and neither needed to speak. Not yet. He handed her a cup of warm broth. Sun's up, he said. She took the cup with shaky hands and drank slowly. Feels like something ended, she whispered. Something did, he replied, and something started. She looked down at the baby, his face soft and unfamiliar. His eyelids fluttered as he dreamed of a world that hadn't yet touched him. They listened to the morning for a while. Distant roosters crowed, a wagon wheel creaked somewhere down the hill. It was the sound of life returning to routine, even if theirs never would. I should leave, she said finally, eyes still on the child, before they ask more questions. You won't make it far, Boaz replied. Not with a newborn and no coin. I've made it on less. That's what I'm afraid of. He stood and walked to the door. Outside, a few townsfolk were already moving. Haley Riggs hauling laundry in a tin bucket, Mr. Avery hammering a loose hinge on his store. None looked toward the marshal's cabin, but Boaz knew they were thinking about it. Thinking about her. He turned back inside. You can stay, he said. A few days. Let him get strong. She studied him carefully. And after that? We'll see. He didn't offer promises, and she didn't ask for them. Both had learned the weight of words not kept. A knock came mid-morning, gentle, no malice in it. Boaz opened the door to find a girl of maybe 15 standing with a cloth-wrapped bundle in her arms. It was Margaret, the preacher's niece. She didn't speak, just extended the bundle. Fresh milk. And bread. Aunt thought, you might need. Boaz took it silently, gave a quiet thank you, and watched her leave. She sat up straighter when he brought it over. Not everyone's turned on me. Most haven't decided yet. Give 'em time. She tore off a piece of bread and chewed slowly. I used to believe people were kind deep down. And now? I think they're afraid. And fear makes people ugly. Boaz sat across from her. It does. But it also makes them careful. Can't say I blame them. Do you fear me, Boaz? No. But I fear for you. She didn't respond to that. The baby whimpered and adjusted in his sleep, and the moment passed. Later, she stepped outside with the child wrapped close to her chest. The light made her squint, and the cold stung a bit against her skin. Boaz joined her, silent as ever, standing just beside without touching. The town looked small from up here, smaller than she remembered. The church steeple was crooked now. The old tree outside the general store was gone. Time had pulled things apart and rearranged them. Looks different, she said. So do you. She glanced at him sideways. Do I look older? No, just real. She smiled faintly, adjusting the wrap around the baby. He hasn't opened his eyes yet. He will, when he's ready. Boaz walked down the steps and began checking the fence along the pasture line. She followed. A few paces behind, walking slow. You think Hatch is done? She asked. No, but he'll wait. He's smart enough not to push too fast. What'll he want? Names, stories, maybe blood. She stopped walking. You think he'll take the baby? Boaz turned to face her. Not unless he wants to meet God. The wind tugged at the wrap across her shoulders. She pulled it tight. I can't give them his name. I know. If they know who the father was, they'll hang that boy before he learns to speak. He looked down. The grass was soaked with rain. Then we give him a name that belongs to no one else. Chance. He nodded. A boy with no past, she said. Only forward. And you? Boaz asked. What future do you want? She didn't answer right away. The question lingered like smoke. I want peace, she said finally. But I'll settle for safety. Boaz glanced up at the sky. They're not the same. No, she said, but I've never had either. They returned to the cabin by midday. She nursed the child in silence while Boaz prepared a stew, chopping root vegetables and dried meat. The domesticity of it all felt strange, too gentle for the weight of what had passed between them. In the afternoon, Tama returned. He entered without knocking and stood in the doorway, face unreadable. Boaz greeted him with a small nod. Storms passed. Tama stepped inside and removed his coat. For now, she looked up from her seat near the hearth. Why did you help me? Tama glanced toward her. I don't help. I choose what I do not stop. Is that supposed to comfort me? No, it's supposed to remind you the world don't owe you kindness. You got some anyway. Boaz asked, You think they'll forget? Tama stared into the flames. They'll remember what they need to, and forget what makes them uncomfortable. She asked quietly, What would you do if you were me? Leave when the ground dries, he said, but not without knowing you're not alone. You offering protection? I don't offer, but I stay close to those who walk true. She thought about that. Chance. Sea stirred and she held him tighter. You'll be judged, Tama added. But judgment's like wind, it hits everyone eventually. As dusk approached, the town settled into its evening rhythms. Lamps lit, horses watered, children called home for supper. Normalcy returned in shallow breaths. Boaz stepped outside to chop wood. Tama stood beside the porch sharpening a blade on a whetstone, humming something low. Inside, she sang softly to the baby, a tune without words, just sound and breath and love. After dark, Boaz returned inside. She handed him the baby without a word, letting him feel the warmth and weight of the boy. Boaz held him carefully, as if the child were a coal that could burn and bless all at once. He has your hands, she said. No, he's his own. She watched the two of them. He deserves more than me. Boaz looked up. You gave him life, that's enough, is it? For now. She rose, wincing, and sat beside them. I won't ask you to raise him. I didn't offer, I know. But if you asked, he said, I wouldn't say no. Silence passed between them like an understanding, no future planned, no oath spoken, just something unspoken growing beneath the floorboards of the cabin and in the veins of the morning that would come. She leaned her head against his shoulder. The baby was between them, warm and breathing. I don't know if I can trust you again, she said softly. You don't have to, he replied. Just don't run before you find out. He felt her exhale, not relief, not yet, but something closer than she'd known in years. Outside, the moon broke through the clouds, casting light over the cabin roof. The storm was far away now, somewhere over the distant ridge. Only the occasional echo of thunder reminded them it had ever been close. Inside, the fire crackled. Chance whimpered once, then went quiet again. And in that quiet, 3 people stayed very still, none of them sure where the road led next, only that for the first time, it might be walked together.